joined by Professor Hartmut Winkler from the Department of Physics at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. We've heard from the Electricity Minister, but do you share President Cyril Ramaphosa's optimism that the worst of load shedding is behind us and that the end is within reach, especially considering Eskom's ongoing challenge?
Well, put it that way, to say that something within reach could mean it's 10 years down the line or it could be next week.
Yeah.
So I think he's deliberately left it open so that he couldn't be called out if that doesn't happen. I still stick to my prediction that we're going to have load shedding for another 5 years, although at the same time I get the sense that we are possibly past the worst of it. For the last 6 months and also early this year, we've been a little bit better than had been predicted. Until then, it had been downhill every year. And now we seem to have arrested that decline. But to actually turn it all around and get everything up and running the way it used to, that's no easy feat. And the reason why power stations are breaking down such a lot is because they've been driven so hard. They're getting old. And just like an old car, once things get to that stage, you are just going to have these very frequent breakdowns. And it looks like that's what again happened this week. Although I am a bit surprised that you had 9 units failing within a space of 2 days. That has, of course, led to some sort of speculation about if there's anything else going on behind it. Difficult to say. I don't have proof of that, but it was a rather unusual and unexpected decline. But unfortunately, that's the sort of thing we're still going to see for quite a while.
So given the President's assertions in Parliament this week, he emphasized the importance of the just energy transition to really address climate change while also creating new economic opportunities. How can South Africa then balance its energy needs with its environmental commitments?
Yes, well, it's certainly going the route of installing a lot more renewables is one way in which you can try and address the energy crisis. Solar and wind do have their weaknesses as well, but by and large, I think that is where the main thrust should be, in my opinion. So I think in that respect, the President is right. What worries me more, though, is that depending on who you talk to in government, you seem to get very different priorities. For example, Minister Mantashe clearly has his priorities are gas, and after that coal and nuclear, and then renewables is somewhere near the bottom. So they're not singing from the same hymn sheet, and I think that's part of the problem because at the moment we don't really have a clear plan of how to go. I think it's clear we do need a lot more renewables, and given that weather conditions in this country are ideal for both wind and solar, it makes sense to develop these a lot further. But all this has got to be done according to plan, and there's got to be full support, and everybody needs to be pulling in the same direction. And I think that's not quite happening right now.
To keep with that same thought, Prof, it begs the question as to what additional measures might be necessary then, also considering the current state of South Africa's energy crisis? Yes,
well, it certainly, I think everybody agrees that we need more generating capacity. The coal plants at the moment are just operating on roughly 50% of their capacity. They're just breaking down far too much. Now, there are some people who say just fix them. It's not as easy as that. Some of the repairs could take years and might even cost more than installing something new. In other cases, it might be a straightforward job, but that depends on each individual case. Most people feel that we need some extra capacity. Now, where could that come from? Okay, if you decide to go the renewables route, now we're typically looking at a solution which should come into place in about 3 years' time.
Yeah.
The construction time for solar farms is about 1.5 years, for wind farms about 2 years, but there is still a process of about a year before that until you can actually start building. There was Minister Mantashe's car power ships, those gas ships. It sounds like a wonderful solution. Yes, certainly those ships can just simply come in, but ultimately they would have accounted for one stage of load shedding. And he's run into a huge number of problems, not only from the environmentalists, but also people claiming that the process wasn't done properly and so on. The long and short of it, even though this was supposed to be an emergency measure, we're now 3 years down the line and those ships haven't come, and it doesn't look to me like they will. If you build something else, okay, according to Minister Mantashe's draft plan, we should be building a lot more gas plants. That takes longer than solar and wind plants, even though he seems to be optimistic that we can have some of those running by 2030. I'm not so sure about that. Gas plants are fairly large. Mozambique has been in the process of developing its gas capacity now for many, many years, and they are just now about to finish their one of the major gas plants that's connected to their offshore fields. It was certainly not something that was done in just a couple of years, and so I expect we would face similar challenges. If you're going for new coal plants, the problem is just where do you find the funding for that? Nobody internationally wants to fund this anymore, and nuclear plants take even very long, 10 years, possibly even longer. So if one decides to go for any of these other options, we just simply have to wait. So in the interim, probably the way to go is to install more renewables, get those up to the level where about half of the country's electricity is run off renewables, the rest of coal, nuclear, and gas, and then see from there.
Prof, let me thank you for joining us. That's Professor Hartmut Winkler from the Department of Physics at the University of Johannesburg, and we've explored the intricacies of South Africa's energy crisis.